Happy Easter from the Alk family. Here are some of our Easter traditions. Go ahead, Case.
We decorated our window for Easter because we show off God's love. We eat chocolate bunnies.
I like to smoke ham.
Cuckoo gaga.
Now say, ready? Jesus is risen, right, guys?
Jesus is risen.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Okay, guys, what does Easter mean to you?
Jesus died for us and our sins. On Easter, he rose from the dead.
Ambry, what does Easter mean to you?
It means caring, love, and I love my family.
And what else? Anything else?
And I love Jesus.
And for us, our family, we enjoy spending time together on Easter, don't we?
Anything else?
Is that it? All right, say Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Getting together with family, which is kind of over the other big events and other items that go on. It's hanging out with family and friends. That's what is the main item for me is for Easter.
Easter is special to us because it gives us time to spend with our family and loved ones.
It's also a time to reflect on everything that God has given us and the fact that Jesus died for us.
Hope, knowing that Christ rose from the grave, gives me a sense that there's nothing that he can't accomplish. There's nothing that is going to keep him from his promise being fulfilled. It gives me hope that someday I'm going to be able to see those that went before me and who've passed on. It gives me hope that no matter the craziness that's going on in the world, he's still in control, and we still know that one day he's going to come again. So to me, that's what Easter is. Easter is hope.
Jesus is risen. The appropriate response is, he is risen indeed. It is Easter Sunday this morning, and as important and as celebrated as Christmas is, Easter, that's kind of the pinnacle of the Christian holidays. It's the high Christian holy day. It receives the emphasis in the Gospels and in the New Testament more broadly. Easter is the moment when all God's promises and plans come together. This is the major gist of Paul's letter to the Romans. Easter ties all of God's plans and promises together in the Messiah, Jesus. Thank you for letting me join you in your home this morning, this Easter Sunday. Now, this certainly isn't the Easter we envisioned earlier in the year, but it's still Easter nonetheless. Don't forget that. The joy, the wonder, and the celebration of Easter cannot be stopped. Hopefully the decor here in the background isn't too distracting for you this morning, but I wanted to get your Easter spirits moving. It's really for the kids, I suppose, but there's a kid in all of us, so hopefully we can all enjoy it. And just to offer a little bit of distraction without disparaging or disrespecting anyone or anybody, but I miss a good Cadbury egg. Is anybody else with me? There are peeps behind me here. I'm not really a Peep fan. Danny, I think you're a Peep fan. But that's kind of my go-to Easter treat. I'm not going to get one this year. On the positive side, though, it's probably for the better. I've mentioned it before, but if I'm not careful, I'm going to come out of this quarantine thing significantly heavier than I went in. So not having that Easter candy is probably not a bad thing this year. Kids, Don't forget that you have a live video conference after this at 10:45 a.m. You can interact with each other and with Brianne. So make sure that you join us for that. The link to that KidMin Zoom meeting is below in the description. So be sure to jump in on that. Adults, immediately following the KidMin time on the Zoom platform, we will pick up. It's the same Zoom meeting, so that you need to use the same link below that the KidMin Zoom meeting is on. So just jump on. You can hang out, watch the kids, or join in 5 or 10 minutes at 10:50, 10:55, and then you can pick up with our discussion and chat. There is nothing to download. Don't go to Zoom, anything like that. Just click on the link. Some people have had problems with that. Just click the link. All right, but this is important, everyone. We will be celebrating communion and the children's blessing together in that Zoom meeting. In that Zoom meeting at 10:45 after the KidMin time, during our chat discussion, we will be celebrating our Easter communion. So if you want to participate in that, you need to follow that link down below. Be ready at 10:50, 10:55, although again, the meeting starts at 10:45. If you don't have communion elements, if you're celebrating us and we didn't get you any communion elements for one reason or another, that's fine. Join us anyway. We can help you take care of that online. So please don't hesitate to join us if you would like to participate in communion with us. Communion is still an important part of what we do as Christians, celebrating that, and we are providing for that even while we are quarantined here. Do you need encouragement? How about some joy? How about some lifting up? Then I would invite you to join me next week when we begin looking at Paul's letter to the Philippians. We're just going to walk straight through Paul's letter. Philippians is one of the most joyful, uplifting, and encouraging letters in the entire New Testament. And we're going to start that next Sunday. I think we're in a time where we really need some joy and some celebrating, and we're going to look at that next Sunday. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook. That'll give you the latest videos and any updates that are happening. So let's read the Easter story together right now. I'm going to be reading from the NIV, the New International Version. The text is going to appear on the screen. I'm going to be reading John chapter 20, verses 1 through 18. So join me either on the screen or reading in your own Bibles as I read John chapter 20 here this morning. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head, the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and to your God. Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord, and she told them that he had said these things to her. All right, we just read the Easter story this morning from John 20. So Mary, Peter, and John check out the empty tomb. Mary sees the angels in the tomb and the risen Jesus. Jesus speaks to her, and she leaves and goes and tells the disciples about the encounter. What do you think the response was to Mary's report? What do you think the disciples would have thought about Mary's report? What would your response been to Mary's story of seeing and talking to Jesus, this teacher that you had been following, that you had just seen crucified, dead and buried 3 days earlier? You know, what would you have made about it? Oh, sure, Mary. You know what? What would you have made of? What would you have made of the story? And we're gonna we're gonna move on in the story here. See, later that Sunday night, that same day, that evening, the disciples gather together in a room in Jerusalem. Let's look here. John 19 and 20. On the evening of that first day of the week, same day, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, Peace be with you. After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side, and the disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said, Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. And with that, he breathed on them and said, Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven. So what are the disciples doing here? They've gathered in this room somewhere in Jerusalem. They've locked themselves in. They've quarantined themselves. What are they doing? We're not entirely sure. I mean, maybe they are gathering together to discuss Mary's report. Again, is it true? Is she gone nuts? Is she sipping the communion wine? Is she imagining things? What's going on? Maybe they're simply gathering because they are still coming to grips with Jesus's death. You know, when Prince died several years ago now, fans generally migrated to one of two spots, either First Avenue in downtown Minneapolis or to Paisley Park out in Chanhassen. It's really just part of the grieving process, gathering together in a place that's associated with the deceased person or dead person, and joining others to grieve and to reminisce. And I'll be honest, we ended up at Paisley Park and hung out at Prince's house there after his death. But in the midst of this fear, in the midst of them being locked in this room together, Jesus seeks them out. See, Jesus always seeks us out in the midst of our fear. Jesus appears in the middle of that locked room and he says to them, what? Peace be with you. And if there were any more apt words for what's going on in this time period here with the disciples, if there's any more apt words for where we are today in 2020, I don't know what they would be. Peace be with you. And Jesus repeats that twice. And we know that anytime anything gets repeated, we need to pay attention to it. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. Why twice? I think that Jesus is attempting to get the disciples to remember what he told them just a few days earlier during what we would call Holy Week. See, he told them in chapter 14 that he was going to send them a helper, the Spirit. He told them very specifically in John chapter 14, verse 27, he says, Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. See, this is exactly what they were here in John 20. Afraid, not having peace, troubled. And Jesus brings them back to that promise. I'm giving you my spirit, and I'm giving you my peace. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. Not the peace that the Roman Empire offered, not the peace at the tip of a sword, or maybe in our day, not the peace at the tip of a nuclear weapon, not the political peace, where you might not be in an actual war, but where a Cold War reigns, not the peace of just a temporary lack of conflict, but where we're quarantined at home and where maybe conflict is increasing as we're learning to live pretty much 24/7 with our loved ones. But the whole, full, all-encompassing peace that comes through the Messiah on this Easter morning. This peace of Christ comes through the presence of the Spirit that Jesus gives. That Jesus gave in chapter 20, that he's going to give kind of a little bit more fully or in a different way possibly in Acts at Pentecost. And Jesus connects the two in John chapter 20, verses 21 and 22. Again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit." So as you are sitting alone, or relatively alone in your homes or apartments, you are not alone in actuality. The Spirit of God is with you and brings you peace. You are never alone on this journey, no matter how lonely or isolated you might feel. Jesus brings you peace, brings us peace through the presence of the Spirit. See, this peace of Jesus means that it's still Easter Sunday. It still came. Easter still came no matter what we're experiencing. You know, it's like the Grinch's statement in How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Listen to this. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the stove, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled and puzzled till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. What if Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store? What if Christmas perhaps means a little bit more? No matter what goes on in the world, Easter still came. Easter is still here this Sunday morning. That is good news. This Easter morning, hear Jesus' words again, "Peace be with you. Peace be with you." We need to grasp fully what this means this morning. See, this isn't a feel-good peace. You look at what Jesus says right after that. He says, "Peace be with you," and then he says, now get out. Get out of this locked room. Get out of this secured room and get into the lion's den. Go. Get out of here. Now, I would have thought to myself, if I was one of the disciples, Jesus, I'm pretty secure right here. I'm pretty comfortable right here. I'm pretty sure I have peace right here. See, Jesus' peace comes through the storm, not peace from it. It comes from getting out of the locked room, not staying in it. You know, when Jesus says, "Peace be with you," he very much seems to be saying, I'm giving you peace, and you're really going to need it because of where I'm sending you. Now get what I'm saying. I'm not saying flaunt the quarantine rules and get out of your house. But I'm saying that Jesus' peace is going to come in spite in the midst of troubles that we face. Jesus isn't going to remove those troubles for us. His peace comes in the middle of them and through them. See, in John chapter 16, Jesus flat out states that his followers are going to have trouble. But it's all right. It's okay because Jesus has overcome the world. and he has given us peace. Here's what I want you to get this Easter morning. Jesus' Easter peace is independent of outward circumstances. I'm going to repeat that. Jesus' Easter peace is independent of your outward circumstances. By all accounts, in the Bible, in Jesus' teaching, in the New Testament, this is entirely possible. It's not a pipe dream. That Easter peace comes in the midst of our difficult circumstances, so that Jesus' Easter peace is independent of our outward circumstances. So, I got to leave you with something. Besides just Jesus' peace is independent of your outward circumstances, how do I obtain? How do we obtain? How do you obtain? How do I obtain this Jesus-given, Spirit-empowered Easter peace? Well, let's look. Number one, if you are following Jesus, if you're a follower of Jesus, this peace is already present, is already here because you have the Spirit in you, because we have the Spirit in us, because the Spirit indwells the church. You've already got it. You have full access to it. It's there. You have to access it. The peace, Jesus' Easter peace, is readily available to all his followers, and it's tied directly to the Holy Spirit. It is there for the taking. So that's the first thing. It is there. It is available to you. Okay? And number two, this readily available peace, well, already in you and available to you, likely needs to be developed, especially if you don't experience it right now. Okay? It needs to be developed. It is like a muscle. It needs to be used. It needs to be developed. It needs to be exercised. Now, we're going to talk more about how we do that on our Zoom meeting on Wednesday night at 7 p.m., link below, 7 p.m. Wednesday night. But I'll mention in passing that New Testament, this Jesus peace, this Spirit-empowered peace, is linked to the Spirit and linked to moral behavior. Okay? We'll talk about this Wednesday night. See, this peace comes in part from behaving properly, behaving in the Spirit, following the Spirit in our behavior. As we do the right thing, as we behave properly, as the Spirit would have us behave, our peace is developed and increased. It's a developmental cycle. As we obey, as we live in obedience to the Spirit and to Jesus' teachings, our peace increases. Okay? And again, we're going to flesh that out a little bit more Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Number three, peace comes from focusing on God's bigger purposes. Jesus says this, okay? Jesus, this purpose comes through, even John sees this in verses 30 through 31. And you can read that. It comes from belief in the Messiah and taking that to others. Jesus tells them, remember, we just saw that, get out of here, get out of this room, get out of this locked area, go out, I'm sending you on mission. All right, peace comes to you as you are involved in Jesus's bigger kingdom purposes. As you further Jesus's kingdom, as you live this out in the Spirit, you will have peace. See, I have never, as a pastor, I have never seen anyone truly experience Jesus's peace, this Spirit-powered peace, who this person would, or a person is completely consumed with their own problems. Okay, I have never seen a narcissist. I have never seen someone who can only obsess about themselves and their own issues experience Jesus's peace. Okay, the strange thing about inner peace and the ironic thing about inner peace, this Jesus peace in our hearts, is that as long as your own welfare and your own personal peace is the only goal, it will always be elusive. You will never find it. Peace comes as we engage in Jesus's work, as we get outside of ourselves. Okay. And lastly, number four, I can only mention this in passing, but it is outward peace comes, being a peacemaker with other people, being able to make peace with others, comes from an inward peace that is rooted in Jesus. It starts with our relationship with Jesus and moves outward from there. And so Jesus is calling us not only to an inward peace, but to be peacemakers, to be people of peace, to be a church of peace as well. And we can get into that more on Wednesday night if we want to. So don't expect outward peace. Don't expect to be a peacemaker without an inward peace. Jesus' Easter peace is independent of outward circumstances. This is a time when we have probably a little bit extra time to think about spiritual things. Our world has been turned upside down. Our foundations have been shaken. Our priorities have been drastically rearranged and upended. Is Easter Sunday a reality for you? Are you certain in whom you are placing your trust, where you're placing your faith? The coronavirus has really shed light on where our faith and where our trust is at. And we looked at that a couple weeks ago, and you can find that on YouTube. Do you have this Easter peace that Jesus gives and that Jesus promises? If you don't, I'd very much like to chat with you further about that. Just a discussion. This is a great time to consider such things, to get your spiritual issues ironed out, which impact all areas of our lives. This is a holistic issue. You can have this peace in the midst of all the junk that's going around nowadays. I'm not going to just have you say a prayer with me this morning. That's not really what following Jesus is all about. You've probably picked that up already. Following Jesus is an entire lifestyle rooted in the wonderful story of Easter, in which Jesus invites us to participate. And so I would invite you, if you want to consider that, if you want this Easter peace and you're struggling with that, reach out to us. The Facebook and instant message is the best way to do that. I invite you, and we will get in contact with you as soon as possible and start that discussion. Happy Easter. Jesus' Easter peace can be independent, should be independent, is independent of your outward circumstances. Hey, Jesus is risen. He is risen indeed. Join us next week as we begin a journey through Paul's joyful and uplifting letter to the Philippians. Jesus' Easter peace is independent of outward circumstances. Take that with you today. We're going to take that with us next week when we get into Paul's letter to the Philippians. Enjoy this Easter Sunday full of peace. Now, may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times in every way. The Lord be with you. I will see you in just a few minutes at 10:45 for Kidmin, for communion, and for an Easter discussion. Blessings this Easter morning.